Hi, brothers and sisters. We're back for our final video. That's if I'm not interrupted, then I'll have to obviously upload it in 2 videos. So our study is in Wisdom chapter 17 to chapter 19. This is the book in one of the books in the Apocrypha called Wisdom. And these are the last, I can not talk right, the last 3 chapters in my final video to be posted. And I wanted to thank all of my precious subscribers and people who put likes on my videos and shared and tried to get the word out. If I forget to say it at the end, you know what? I'll see you in the next life. I'm certain of it. Because if you were searching for the truth in earnest, I think you probably found it. So anyway, let's get to it. I've actually made quite a few, whoops, hit the wrong button, extensive notes on this. Let's go down here. This is where we need to go. Now whether, yeah, I mean, you most of you know my stumblings. You know my shortcomings. So initially when I started studying these last 3 chapters, I was in a different rendering altogether. And now here at the end, I'm in Bible Hub's rendering of Wisdom, which is one of the ones that I often go to. But actually, I studied it in 2 different places, and I liked the rendering in certain places, but I think we'll just kind of stick with this one in the end, which is on Bible Hub. I won't even go to my other version of it. I like this one a lot, and this may well be my version of it. I didn't actually compare. I did at some point, and now I forget whether they were the same or varied at some point. So anyway, let me see. Make sure I got the correct notes here. Okay. So I got to follow these as I go, because if I don't, I'll leave them behind, and we'll end up having to stick them on the end. So let's begin. Wisdom chapter 17. So this is the New Revised Standard Version Catholic Edition is what it says at the top of it. And then the little title that it gives to it is Terror Strikes the Egyptians at Night. Now what we've come to understand on this channel is that there is a spiritual overlay of events at the end that correlates to these events, but you have to get them in allegory. If you can't be bothered to pick them up in allegory, then you will never understand what we're talking about. So, Wisdom chapter 17, verse 1. Great are your judgments and hard to describe. And they are God's judgments. As we cite through the Bible, it's not easy to pick them up. But once you get your allegories, which is the comparative that you need, then you can understand them a bit easier, because even God's judgments is written in allegory. So that's the thing that you kind of have to take away in your thought when you're actually studying this. Okay, well, now what's the spiritual overlay of this, the allegorical overlay on this that we can see, that compares to other words that will help you understand what the true judgment of God looks like. Okay, verse 1. Great are your judgments and hard to describe. Therefore, uninstructed souls have gone astray. Well, where did we find this word? And I get this wrote down in my notes, actually, and I should have. Where did we find instructions that we were to listen to? Sorry if that's glaring on me. I can't tell. Let me go to my camera. I apologize for the glaring. I do not want that intentional. I don't. So maybe if I put that down just a little bit, it won't glare. No, it's glaring worse, isn't it? Let's turn it. Maybe. Sorry. I did play with it in the beginning, and it's not. I apologize for that. But it's the way I'm doing it, it's hard. Let me close that back up and see if it makes any difference at all. Well, it does. It really does. Okay, sorry for that. We'll just talk about it. I won't open that. Okay, I'm going to go back so we can. Oh, don't exit. Oh, I just exited. Oh my goodness. Just a moment. Okay, let's go back down here and do this. Sorry. We're going to put that tab back up. New tab to the right. Sorry about that. Wisdom. Yep, that would be it. 17. Okay, so we're back. Sorry about that. I always have these stumbles. It just seems to be part of my routine when I'm studying. Okay, where did we find the word instruction? All right, we know this on this channel. Where do we pick up wisdom in the Bible? We pick her up in Proverbs, don't we? In other places. In other places that she's clearly identified all the same traits as wisdom, so we know it is her that is being addressed or spoken of. So when we find this word instructed, we get the opposite of uninstructed. To instruct it, it is with wisdom in Proverbs chapter 1. So great are your judgments, wisdom, and they are hard to describe, wisdom, because you're so bloody wise. It's hard for us people who are uninstructed to understand your ways. Therefore, uninstructed souls have gone astray. She says, when I called in Proverbs 1, you could not be bothered to listen to my instructions. And here we've got the uninstructed souls have gone astray because you refused her when she called to you. Verse 2, for when lawless people supposed that they held the holy nation in their power. So here we go to the allegory. So in the beginning, this concerned the Egyptians holding the Israelites as captives in Egypt. And at the end, we come to the holy nation would largely be considered the Christian nation. Suppose that they held the holy nation in their power. They supposed to be the holy people, and they're the power, right? So these are lawless people. What makes you lawless? Well, God says, I give you 10 commandments to follow. And the very first one you are already found in violation of. If you're found in violation of that first commandment, guess what? You're in violation of the other 9. Automatically. The first violation that came upon this world was to walk after other gods. And you have walked after other gods. Man-made idols is what you're walking after. And you're not walking in the way of God, which is what this is going to draw us into the law. It's going to verse us idolatry, a man-made idol in religion that you're encaptured in, you're ensnared in that darkness, and all of this is going to tell it. Versus not walking in the law of God. And the one that God sent to show you that law, you reject at the end, which then does bring on your final judgment, according to the Bible. So this word instruction is important. Uninstructed is important because it'll lead our mind back to Proverbs 1 with the one that you rejected and you wouldn't hearken to her instructions, which was wisdom. So great are your judgments and hard to describe. Therefore, instructed souls have gone astray. And there we're through verse 1. Look, just like that. For when lawless people suppose that they held the holy nation in their power, they themselves lay as captives of darkness and prisoners of a long night. Look at that. What do you suppose that means? Well, you're in darkness. You're walking in darkness. But I wrote verses down all over here. Let me see. So we'll read 3, and then we're kind of going to backtrack on these. So for when lawless people suppose that they held the holy nation in their power, they themselves lay as captives of darkness and prisoners of a long night. So the first is the Egyptians, who had 3 days of darkness come upon them as part of the curses. We also get the locusts coming over them in darkness and eating, I think 1/3, 2/3 of the tree, the green things in the land is going to be your end time for the land of idolatry, which is what earth has fallen into, and pretend that they're holy about it. They themselves lay as captives of darkness and prisoners of a long night. So we got the Egyptians in the beginning doing this, and here at the end we got the so-called holy people who are really living in darkness. They don't know what they're guilty of. Just like the Egyptians did not know what they were guilty of. So they shut in under their roofs exiles from eternal providence. So initially the daughters came from heaven to give the laws of heaven. The heaven is described as, for us, because we're in a lower heaven, we're in, the first heaven. The second heaven to us is largely outer space, right? And that's identified as waters to some degree. And we'll get that more and more as we read here. so that they themselves lay as captives of darkness and prisoners of a long night. You're in absolute ignorance. You're in darkness. Shut in under their roofs, exiles from eternal providence. So they shut in the daughters who were from an eternal providence, from an eternal lineage. That's the daughters of Israel. And that means that our seed came from out there, from the heavens. We get that. We know we get it. In Job, don't we? Anybody who's been on this channel, and it is found in Job. Okay, there goes the light, sorry. Job 31, I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid? For what portion of God is there from above? You see, they shut in the exiles from eternal providence. That was the daughters. It tells you that. Job's telling you that himself. And what inheritance of the Almighty from on high? The daughters were mother's inheritance, wisdom, and she's called wisdom. And these daughters were her eternal, they were from eternal providence. They could trace their lineages on back forever and ever and ever. Can you imagine having a history so long that you can trace it back and back and back and back and back for thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of years? Wow. We would consider that eternal providence, wouldn't we? We would. For thinking that in their secret sins, they were unobserved behind a dark curtain of what? Of forgetfulness. So what actually causes us to forget? What is one of the biggest things that causes us to forget our past? Time. Time causes us to forget our own past, doesn't it? And we get these verses, so let me read my notes here. So let me finish reading verse 3. For thinking that in their secret sins they were unobserved, behind a dark curtain of forgetfulness, they were scattered, terribly alarmed, and appalled by specters. Now, when you get reading about that 3 days of darkness, and I haven't found the specters in here, but you will get accounts of it in other places of record that mostly from the Jewish accounts or Hebraic accounts. Some of their writings will tell of the specters that and it tells us where these specters come from. So I'm not going to spoil it for you. But in that 3 days of darkness, the Egyptians became so frightened by that deep darkness that it says not even a light would penetrate it. That's how dark and heavy it was. And it tells us how it terrifies them, really. And that terror comes from our own mind, putting it in us. So for thinking that in their secret sins they were unobserved behind a dark curtain of forgetfulness. So those who hide in darkness, their dirty little sins, they're going to suffer from all of these things that they thought to do, is your idea. That's your parallel. What you think to do in sin, it's going to come right back upon your heads. So these Egyptians was the Israelites' warning not to fall into idolatry, which is exactly where we are today. And so the idea is that just as these Egyptians who were idol worshippers, who did not know the true living God, would not walk in the laws of the true God, turned away from that, they suffered all of these curses to come upon them. Those who have made themselves idols, who have turned away from the truth of the God that was gave in covenant to teach man the laws of heaven. She is called God because she came from above. And the sons of God were the sons of these daughters. That all of these same curses will come upon you in the end of days. And all of them kind of lines up. They do. They absolutely line up. So for thinking that in their secret sins they were unobserved behind a dark curtain of forgetfulness, they were scattered, terribly alarmed, and appalled by specters. So verse 3, behind a curtain of forgetfulness. What causes us to forget if not the passage of time, right? So Jeremiah 23, God says, you forgot my name for Baal, which is husband, who wanted to rule over you. Hosea 2, she says, I will remove the name of Baal off of your tongue. He's not your Lord and Master. And it says, she will respond to me as she did in the days of her youth. So we saw daughters like Esther being removed from their mothers who were being murdered as the wise women in the nation that could have taught these young daughters, you don't bow to no king. He's not your head. Your head is wisdom. You listen to her. You hearken to the mothers of the nation of Israel and what they teach you. And what did Mordecai's name mean? Follower of Marduk. What's Marduk another name for the solar calf deity? What's the solar calf deity another name for? Apis, the bull god Apis, god that came out of Egypt, which then we're told in those readings in Wikipedia or wherever you want to get them from, that Apis, that Marduk are all names for Baal, and that Baal becomes an idol standing, and Baal is another name for your husband as Lord and God, which is the plague that break in upon them. Balaam and Balak was sending in the women who knew their lie to seduce the men so that they would take out their own right hand, identified as these wise women. We see them murdering these daughters on the cornerstones, on the corners, the streets, it says, and they were offering up a blood libation as opposed to the water libation that they were supposed to be offering up. Then we get sons like Mordecai taking the next generation of little girls, because the wise women had been murdered, and teaching them how to bow to a king. So God says, you forgot my name for Baal. You forgot it all because you had nobody of wisdom to teach you any different. So she said she will respond to me as she did in the days of her youth, as when she came up out of the land of Egypt. So there was a time when these daughters were responding strongly to their head, their wisdom mother. What is said of her youth? What do we hear say? You forgot your creator in the days of your youth. Who's our creator? Who's the potter? Right? Who's the creator? Who's the maker? Identified. We identified her. Mother. And it's mother wisdom. And she would not have taught us to bow to a man. She would have taught us love. Yes, we bow to one another out of love. But it is not a forced law upon the daughters like man has made it. She says he's not fit to be in covenant with, and this would be the reasons why he does not follow the laws of God. And the laws of God was found on the daughter's tongue, not on man's. And he uses that to his benefit to yoke her under a miserable law system that could not follow God in a million years. Even the 10 commandments that Christians supposedly walk, they tag on, but I'm your head woman. Big elephant in the room today. You better go look into that one. But most don't even know what's going on. They really don't. So you departed from your creator in the days of your youth, and we see why she did that. And so, let me see here. Where does that lead me to? So, let me get. For thinking that in their secret sins they were unobserved behind a dark curtain of forgetfulness. So we find these passages in the Bible, Isaiah 29:15, to hide their plans from the Lord, who do their work in what? Darkness, behind a dark curtain of forgetfulness. Who do their work in darkness. And think, who sees us? Who will know? You know, it's that curtain of forgetfulness. It's called time. Time will cause us to forget the truth. And especially when you've got those working behind the scene in darkness to manipulate, right? They're the great manipulators of this world. Job 22:13. What does it say? What does God know? It's got he? No, does she judge through thick darkness? Now, who do we describe as God? The presence of God on earth. That's in the Old Testament. We identified the camp of Mahanaim, the camp of God, Jacob calls her. And we find that camp with the Shulamite identified as a camp of she-goats, which is then found in your Genesis 15:9 covenant. And she will be restored to her rightful sovereignty as the spirit that governs the kingdom. The covenant with the harlot spirit currently bowing to man as God, the idol of Baal, husband as Lord and God. Father as creator, all made by men. Yeah. Pushed on women through little girls after they had murdered the wise women that could have taught the next generation that this is not right. This is not of God. You were to make no idols, male or female. You were to be found bowing to nothing. You were to be found following the way. And you haven't done that. but the presence of God was identified as God on this earth. And so once they get rid of the presence of God, they think, which is the spirit identified more with the female than the male, she's the representation of God Mother on earth, which is the spirit on earth in the way that God rules. And so they say God has forgotten. She judged through, does she judge through thick darkness? He says to himself, God has forgotten. See, we get a dark curtain of forgetfulness, don't we? God has forgotten. She hides her face and she never sees. Hide your face has the idea to turn your back, even to close your eyes and to go to sleep. So God hid her face from us. Psalm 10:13. Why has the wicked man renounced God? He says to himself, she will never call me to account. Well, she does call him into account. She calls him in Psalm 50. So when she calls man or the earth, summons the earth to account. We will get genome. G means earth. Nome means law, is what we've come. So earth's law. And there is a spirit that is responsible for that earth's law, which is the one that was given covenant. And Job speaks of her as the inheritance of God. She's the inheritance of not a father, but she's the inheritance of mother. And so she gets summoned. When she gets summoned, because we get that double overlay again, and it's only for those who can think this way. If you can't think this way, then you're not going to be able to pick the truth up. The allegory, you're not going to be able to pick up the spiritual overlay. It'll be for those it's intended for, from all understanding, because not everybody can understand it. So she summons that spirit of the earth who went down to make a name for herself. You find her in Isaiah 63. She's the one that parted the waters. She is. And she suffered daily with them. We're told that in that passage, and we're told it in Psalm 68. She's the dove that laid amongst the ash heap, who goes to sleep in the spirit in a sense. So when that spirit goes to sleep, then we're told she awakens like a warrior that's been drunk on wine. The wine is allegorical to your admixture of doctrine on the table that you Christians drink. And then she goes on to say, I've set the table. I have set the table with wine for that number. That number that will be, that's condemned. They're condemning themselves by what they believe. So God has forgotten. She hides her face and never sees. I don't know that I finished my thought. Why has the wicked man renounced God? He says to himself, she will never call me to account. When does she call man or the earth? She summons the earth to account. So she summons the spirit out. The spirit gives account. The spirit wins her case. She's sent back, and then she summons man. All right? So man gets summoned in Psalm 50, 17, 23. So this chapter is about the Asaph, the gatherer. She's the gatherer, who is also found as the Koheleth in Ecclesiastes 12, called the preacher, but is a female assembler. And she's assembling the case in order, which is akin to your little book. Okay, so that's at the end. Was there anything else? So, for not even the inner chamber that held them protected them from fear. That's verse 4. But terrifying sounds rang out around them. So not even their structure, their house that they were in, protected them from their fear of what was going on up here, right? But terrifying sounds rang out around them, and dismal phantoms with gloomy faces appeared, and no power of fire was able to give light, nor did the brilliant flames of the star avail to illuminate that hateful night. Verse 6, nothing was shining through to them except a dreadful, watch this, self-kindled fire. And in terror, they deemed the things that they saw to be worse than that unseen appearance. So their imaginations were really getting away on them. They were making these sounds. It tells us what these sounds were around them, and they were making them out to be so much worse than what they were, which is what the imagination will do. And it says it. So let's keep reading. Nothing was shining through to them except a dreadful self-kindled fire. Self-kindled, right? Fear. Actually, a truth to some degree was the specter here, kind of their own judgment coming on them. The delusion of their magic art lay humbled, and their boasted wisdom was scornfully rebuked. For those who promised to drive off the fears and disorders of a sick soul were sick themselves with ridiculous fear. That takes us to the verses, the heart will be failing them for the things that will be coming upon the earth. And the idea, when we get further on in these studies, this study here, is that, your own mind created your own delusions that's bringing on, and the idea is it's a magic art. It is a magic art form that you're actually partaking in when you violate that first covenant, to have no other God before you. And through this magic art, it places your wicked imaginations actually manifest and create your own fear and your own judgment. It's kind of your idea behind these last 3 chapters in wisdom. And I would really encourage most to go in. I would encourage all to go in and read them for yourself and try to pick up the allegory that is so easily there once you get the allegory. So, their delusions of their magic art, this is verse 7, lay humble, and their boasted wisdom was scornfully rebuked. For those who promised to drive off the fears and disorders of a sick soul were sick themselves with ridiculous fear. Now, I did have more verses there, didn't I? Yes. Woe to those who go to great depths. I wrote that one down. But in Isaiah 46, the ones that should be able here to lead the sick soul and the disorders out of these fears are unable to lead them out because they themselves are sick themselves with ridiculous fear. And we understand that to be true because we pick it up in Psalm 50. I never read because I've read it so many times in other channels, other videos. And she does accuse him, and she brings him to account, the spirit of the earth, whose law you rejected. She appeared at the beginning. She appears at the end. So we'll do this right quick before we go to the next passage of where these ones who should be able to deliver you out of the fear has themselves a ridiculous amount of fear and can't deliver you. But we'll read Psalm 50 right quick. A psalm of Asaph, your gatherer. The mighty God, even the Lord, had spoken and called the earth from the rising of the sun unto the going down thereof. Summons. She has summoned the earth. They've got heat, but she has summoned it to account. First, she summons the spirit. The spirit, we're told from all accounts, in Daniel chapter, is it 8, where the Ancient of Days appears and opens the book for judgment, right? And she says in Job, and we did a video on it 2 or 3 videos back, don't remember. She says, I'll wear his accusations like a queen upon my head. And she did. She's worn this accusation upon her head like a queen. She smiled through all the accusations, and in the end, she wakes like a warrior that's been drunk on wine. And then she parts the admixture of doctrine, the wine, which is your Red Sea allegory, into the 2 covenants that gets identified in Genesis 15. Genesis 15:9. Because you got a dove to one side, and you've got a pigeon to the other. So you got a feminine, you get a masculine, you get the parting of this admixture of lies into the 2 covenants, one of blood, one of water. The blood was of men who wanted to create a male god, and they did. The other one was the water, was the original spirit rejected in the beginning. She says, when I parted the water, the admixture of lies, your wine on the table, the Red Sea, after I parted, then it came over and you didn't see my pathway. You didn't see me at all. They made certain to cover it over. And we link that to the Assyrian. We do. We've understood that it was the Assyrian that followed her into her own land, this idol worship, particularly on the men's tongue. This time, they were rejecting the righteous daughters. So anyway, she calls the spirit out. She wins her case from all accounts that we see. She's gave her dominion back. And from there, she calls into account man. She calls man to give account for what he did. And we get that account in Psalm 50. And this is where you're going to have to learn to rightly divide the word of truth. There's male and female on planet Earth. There isn't male, 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 or one male. You are without excuse. And then they can tag on Jesus as all of those things. You're still without excuse not to understand the Godhead. I manifested it in what I created for your eyes to bear witness to, not for some liar to write a whole bunch of lies in words, which is why there's a little book of truth sealed up in there that these holy ones who has been preserved from the beginning for the very end, that'll rise up in the spirit and show you otherwise, because not by might nor by power, but by my spirit do I accomplish all things. So she calls man to account. So we get it in Psalm 50, out of Zion, the perfection of beauty, God has shined. Our God shall come and shall not keep silent. She kept silent long time, have I held my peace. Now will I go forth as a travailing woman. I will destroy and devour at once. I will lead you in pathways that you have not known. My pathway was covered over. Our God shall come and shall not keep silent. A fire shall devour before her, and it shall be very tempestuous round about her. It's about her, the one rejected from the beginning. She shall call to the heavens from above and the earth, that she may judge her people. That's right. Setting your case in order gives you your sword. And we're going to see this in wisdom, how that actually becomes one and the same. A sword to judge, which is her word of office. And when they reject her word, the word becomes a mighty sword, able to cut away the wicked when they won't hearken to it. So gather my saints together unto me, those that have made a covenant with me by sacrifice. So sacrifice here absolutely has two meanings. These were the daughters that were cut away in the very beginning. They made a sacrifice for wisdom's truth, for mother's truth, for God of heaven's truth, for the maker, the creator, and the potter's truth. And sacrifice by giving words of praise. And those praise smells like a sweet smelling savor unto mother. That's what it says. And we'll hit that as we continue. And the heaven shall declare her righteousness, for God is judge herself. And she is. Hear, all my people, and I'll speak, O Israel, and I'll testify against thee. I'll testify against you. You're wrong. I am God, even thy God. And I will. We studied Psalm 50 profusely in many videos, and we have concluded, because of what follows, that she absolutely does reprove them for their sacrifices and their burnt offerings that have continually been before me. I will take no bullock out of your house, nor he-goats out of your folds. So it says, I will not reprove thee. Of course she's reproving you. That's why she says, I will take no bullocks out of your house, nor he-goats out of thy folds. I am going to reprove you. I want nothing to do with your kind. That's what she's saying. I'll take no males out of you. No males at all. If all you can do is accuse the spirit of the original covenant, who is now found to have her dominion restored back to her, then don't worry. I'm taking nothing from your fold. You're not worth it. For every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle upon 1,000 hills. Everything is mine. I know all the fowls of the mountain, and the wild beasts of the fields are mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world is mine, and the fullness thereof. Will I eat the flesh of bulls, or drink the blood of goats? I taught you not to shed blood. That's what she's saying to you. Why would you offer me blood and goats and bulls to eat? I don't want nothing to do with your sacrifices of blood. I told you you were to shed no blood, because once you begin shedding the blood of animals, then it moves to shedding the blood of humans, particularly daughters. It gets easier and easier to do. It really does, if you've got no brain to reason with. I'm going to have a long video. So God says, offer unto God thanksgiving, and pay thy vows unto the Most High, which was the office of these daughters. It was to offer up thanksgiving. When God keeps you safe, when God provides rain for your fields, when God provides you warmth to grow your crops, to keep you safe, you offer up thanks for that. You be thankful for that in your heart. God says, I didn't ask for blood. I own everything. Why would I ask you for bloodshed? Why would I ask you for the blood of a man? I didn't ask you for the blood of a man. I asked you to walk in my way and not to make any idols, which is what you're guilty of doing. So she says, make thanksgiving. You give thanks to the Most High, and you pay your vows by keeping your oath, by walking the laws of the Most High. Yeah, it's not that hard to reason, unless you've got so much bloody pride that the truth matters so little to you. And I believe that's where we are. That's what idol worship leads to. A desire not to hear the truth. You are locked in weakness. We're going to get to that. And call upon me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver thee, and thou shalt glorify me. But unto the wicked God saith, what hast thou to do to declare my statutes? You won't even walk in them. You're talking about a male God and blood. That's all you know. But you do not know me, God says. You approach to me with the vain traditions of your men. That's what you approach to me with. And you forgot my name for Baal, Jeremiah 23. And they began to prophesy through the wicked imaginations of their heart. You are guilty of idolatry. And we're trying to tell you that is what you are guilty of. Come away from that foolishness and start simply walking in the pathways of God and be thankful for it. But unto the wicked God saith, what have you to do with my law? Or that you should take my covenant in your mouth, which is what these wicked men did, and profess that they are doing. No, they aren't. They're walking in the pathways of Baal, of their forefathers, of Satan, the accuser, Adam. That's who they're walking in. Seeing thou hatest instruction, whose instructions? Wisdom and her daughters who are instructing you, right? Because Mother Wisdom is our head, and it's her law that the kingdom was to uphold. You were to make no idols, neither male nor female, and you made idols. Seeing thou hatest instructions, Proverb 1, when I called, you couldn't listen to me, you couldn't listen to my instruction, and you cast my words behind you, knowing that in the time, you would forget all of these things. When thou sawest a thief, you consentest with him, and you have been partakers with adulterers. You give your mouth over to evil, and your tongue frameth deceit. Watch this. Thou sittest and you speak against your own, not brother. It was the sister that was accused in the garden. Adam accused the spirit of the original covenant. That was the woman. And she says, I would wear his accusations. Oh, that he wrote it in a book, his accusations. I would wear it like a crown upon my head. And she did. This spirit wore it like a crown upon her head. You watch women. We know. We're to blame for we get it. We know. We'll wear it like a crown. And she did. His false accusations is what it comes down to. You sit and you spoke against thy sister. You slandered your own mother's daughter. These things you have done, and I kept silent. Now there's a court case pending. It has been in this time frame for thousands of years been pending. And she will wear it like a crown, and she will bear the burden. And that's the deliverance of children, to give another chance for some daughter to be reborn, to come forth with the truth and to prove the case, to give you the spirit back in covenant. But if you want to be fools at the end and discard everything that wisdom has to say and to instruct, then you bring your own judgment upon your head. So these things has thou done, and I kept silence. I'm not silent anymore. You thought I was altogether a man just like you. I was going to keep on keeping on with your lies. Or that I was one of your harlots, Baal, like you. And that you were my master and my head, and I wasn't allowed to use my own head, wisdom, to think with. But you thought I was altogether a man like you. or a harlot, like you, a harlot spirit. But I will reprove you, I will rebuke you, and I will lay out the case before you. That's the Qoheleth in Ecclesiastes 12, the females. They want to call it a nom de plume. Well, no. It's a female assembler. Yeah? But I will reprove you, and I will set them in order before your very eyes. For those with wisdom, who will listen and hearken to her instructions, you will know the case has been set in order. It will reason. And it's a little book. It's a little book, not this big old book of accusations. Now consider this, you that have forgot God, lest I tear you in pieces, and there will be none to deliver you. That's the lionesses that you find appointed not by man, but by the Spirit, by wisdom. In Micah chapter 4, I believe we find the lionesses. If not in Micah 4, it'll be Micah 5. Now consider this, you that forget God, and lest I tear you in pieces, there be none to deliver. Whosoever offereth praise unto me, wisdom. Who's that? Wisdom, our mother, wisdom. The high and almighty God, who formed all life. And by forming all life, she creates all things. We also get the idea that the planets are allotted by her. They actually represent her seed. Yeah. Whosoever offereth praise glorifieth me, and to him that ordereth his conversation aright will I show the true salvation of God. So what that means is you have to take an active interest in seeking the truth. In order to seek that truth, it means in the end, if you're true and right about seeking the truth, not lying about it, but you really want to seek that truth in here, and it'll be written on your heart, and it'll reason up here with wisdom, you're going to start asking the right questions. You're going to start seeking to order your conversation aright. Okay. So back to Isaiah 46. We wanted to look at those cowards who are supposed to be leading you out of this great fear that's come upon the Egyptians, but even their leaders could not lead them out of this great fear because they were so full of such ridiculous fears that they couldn't even begin to lead them out of the darkness, is your idea, which is where the world is. And they're so full of their own made-up fears, and we're going to hit at that in a minute. But first we'll read what happened to these leaders in Isaiah 46. Bel, that's another name for Baal, boweth down. Nebu. Nebu is another name, I think, for Nebuchadnezzar, as well as Nimrod, or Babylon, in a sense. That made these gods. It was under the Babylonian captivity that this religious lie and law took form and shape. Torah, for it fed out to the four corners and really shaped a law system that really put a heavy yoke, in particular, on the daughters' necks. That's why we get the Mara, the bitterness of the law, and the wormwood upon their necks is your allegory to the law system. So their idols were upon the beasts. The beast here is feminine. It's the women. The idols of a man, of a male god, was upon the women and upon the cattle. Your carriages were heavy laden. They are a burden to the weary beast. So they carry these burdens of man's gods upon them, and they help build him up, even under this great burden of their man-made law system due to their man-made religious lies and laws. And we see that burden spoken of in Zephaniah chapter 3, these women who wear this burden upon them, this lie upon them like a great burden. I thought for a second I heard something. So what does it say? It says they stooped, they bowed down together, and they could not deliver the burden, but themselves are gone into captivity. So these men who hid in darkness when they forged this great lie, this great idol, male god, have themselves gone into captivity. They forgot their own lie, is what it says. And they have fell into that snare that they actually laid for the daughters to fall into. And then it says, but she awakens, and she escapes. But it says, but they do not. They do not escape. So they stooped, they bowed down together. They could not deliver the burden, but themselves are gone into captivity. So hearken unto me, O house of Israel. Jacob stole her name. Israel is the woman's seed, and it's in regard to the women that was rejected, and all the remnant of the house of Israel, these daughters, and possibly a few sons, which are carried by me from my belly, from my womb, which are carried from my womb, is how it should be rendered. And even to your old age, I am, guess who has a womb? He! No, she does. And even to your old age, I am she, and even to your hairs will I carry you. Even to your old age will I carry you. I have made you. I will bear you, and I will carry, and I will deliver you. Now, I'm getting earth here in reference. Earth is speaking as a spirit here. And there seems to be one who represents that spirit that was gave in covenant, and they rejected her. G-nom-mai is your word. 1096. G means earth. Nomai means the law. All right? So we get the antinomians, the antichrist. He's against her, the sovereign, and her law is what you get. And so she says, as the earth's spirit, the earth's womb, in a sense where we all come from, and we come from that spirit accordingly, she will carry you to the very end, she says. And even to your old age, I am she, and even to your old hairs, white hairs, gray hairs, will I carry you. I have made, I will bear, even I will carry, and I will deliver you. So this is the mother speaking. Oh, it's daddy, daddy, daddy who gave life to everything. Oh, Diddy, you want to look out. The creator that you denied in your youth. She sends that spirit of earth once again to teach you the deeper truths. There is a name here. I've shared it before. I couldn't help but see my name in it, and it means remember, because we're going to hit remember here in a minute. Now, where is it? Let's see. Yeah, forgetfulness. Where's remember? Yeah, so I was going to use it in verse 3 again. For thinking that in their secret sin they were unobserved behind a dark curtain of forgetfulness. So we see in, you see, go over here. It is found in Isaiah 25, verses 7-8. She says, I will remove this dark covering, this dark curtain of forgetfulness from off the mountain, from off this world, this veil of darkness and forgetfulness. And so that had led me long ago when I started my study. I hit a word here, and it was Strong's Greek 3415. And it's M-N-A-O-M-A-I. And I see my name in that. My name is Naomi. And I hit on this years ago. And it means to be mindful and to remember, to recollect, to recall, bring to mind, remember, recollect, be mindful, actively bring it to mind. So there's a spirit, I believe, within me that has actively caused this remembering. That I'm having of so many things, which now I'm sharing in the word with you. So that's why that word forgetfulness, behind a dark curtain of forgetfulness. That was verse 3, and I had that word pulled up because I couldn't help but that's why. I know it's the Spirit. The Spirit can lead you to so many things if you give the Spirit a chance. And it kind of surprised me. So anyway, moving on here. What's my next reference? Yeah, here we're coming up on the cowards. I like this one. So, for not even the inner chamber that held them protected them from fear, not even their houses, but terrifying sounds rang out around them, and dismal phantoms with gloomy faces appeared. And no power of fire was able to give light, nor did the brilliant flames of the star avail to illuminate that hateful night. Nothing was shining through to them except a dreadful self-kindled fire. And in terror, they deemed the things that they saw to be worse than that unseen appearance. So what was the unseen appearance? The delusion of their magic art lay humbled, and their boasted wisdom was scornfully rebuked. For those who promise to drive off the fears and disorders of a sick soul were sick themselves with ridiculous fears. That's the snare, the burden. They fell into it themselves. For even if nothing disturbing frightened them, yet scared by the passing of wild animals and the hissing of snakes, they perished in trembling fear. So is this 3 days of darkness in the end that is appointed to come upon the world? And it's going to be such a great darkness that not even light will be able to penetrate it, according to that. And so we see for the horrible things that's coming upon the earth, their hearts will fail them. Is that the horrible things that's coming upon the earth, their own wicked imaginations really confusing the things around them, and they're making them worse than what they truly are? So they perished in trembling fear, refusing to look even at the air, though it nowhere could be avoided. For wickedness is a cowardly thing. Here we go. Let's understand this pretty good. For wickedness is fear. Wickedness is a cowardly thing, condemned by its own testimony, distressed by conscience. It has always exaggerated the difficulties. For fear is nothing but a giving up of the helps that come from reason, wisdom, and hope defeated by this inward weakness. So those who profess to have so much hope in their male God, they're so fearful, right, of looking at channels like mine and being able to reason the simple truth out, and they make it so complicated, and they're so afraid that they're going to be found to turn away from their idol. But it's that fear, that cowardness, that is actually their own testimony, and their own testimony, distressed by conscience. It has always exaggerated the difficulties. It really is that simple. God's truth reasons out. It really does. It's not a he. God didn't require blood. God required you walked in the laws of heaven. And we get a first, second, third heaven. Earth was dropped into a lower dimension when we failed to walk the pathway of the law system of the heavens that we were at one time a part of before we fell. Her portion, she had allotment, and I think there was more than one planet. There may be 7 left with existing people on them, and so we may come up to that 7th thunder idea in a minute. But, so what was I saying? I can't remember. But it's really simple, right? There's male and female on earth, and the female gives life. She forms the clay in her womb, and she gives life. She's the maker, she's the creator, she's the potter. Why in God's heavenly, wonderful name would you want to tag that title to a father who does not give life, but chose to become corruption? And you'll get that verse in Job, somewhere in Job, I can't remember it. Father corruption. How is it worded? I can't remember. And your worm, and it'll talk like it's a son. I don't think. Father and son corruption, and mother and daughter, the worm that has fed on that corruption. Yeah, they were the corrupt ones. They're the corruption. And you all go, oh, glory to Father and Son. They're the corruption. They're the corruption that you're feeding on. And the idea is what? How will I be saved? In that verse, because we talked on this in one of the videos. And boy, am I going to have a long video if I'm going to take all 3 chapters. So let me see. I ain't even got my hands in the right spot. Okay, there we go. Okay, so she says in Psalm 22, I am a worm and no man. That's because it is no man. It is a woman and a daughter, a mother and a daughter. So we found it in Job 17, verse 14. If I say to corruption, you are my father and son, and to the worm, my mother or my sister. So what does the worm feed on if not the corruption? She has fed on the corruption of a father who claimed to be God and who made everything. And boy, don't the sons just love it. Oh yeah, they just love being the corrupters of this. And as the corrupters, they teach it to those silent mothers and daughters out there in this world, sitting in the pulpits of the churches saying, "Oh, shh, he's the voice of God." No, he ain't. He's the voice of corruption, corrupting you into the covenant that will be disannulled, and you will be cut away if you choose not to walk in her way. Her office is the word, and when you reject that word turns into a sword, because your word is allegorical to your tongue, and your tongue is allegorical to your sword. Okay, so I better get moving here, or we're never going to get through these chapters. Okay, so for wickedness is verse 11. Let me see. For wickedness is a cowardly thing, condemned by its own testimony, distressed by conscience. It has always exaggerated the difficulties. For fear is nothing but a giving up of the help that comes from reason, and hope defeated by this inward weakness prefers ignorance of what causes the torment. Yeah, that's what it says, right? Yeah. And hope defeated by this inward weakness prefers that ignorance of what causes the torment. So your torment is caused by your own religious lie that you're willingly walking in fear, in cowardice, because you won't open your eyes and you won't turn away from the lie because you're too afraid that you might hear reason. And that's exactly how simple God's truth is. It reasons. And nobody wants to understand that simple truth. There is male and female on planet Earth. There is not one male. There is not three males. There's not even two males. There's male and female. And the female gives life. She is the creator. And she represents the spirit from above. And we get that understanding in Malachi 2. For anybody who wants to reason, but we realize you're too afraid to do that. You're caught up in your own religious lies and you're too afraid, and you're distressed by your own made-up conscience. It has always exaggerated the difficulties. It's reason. It reasons. Wisdom reasons. Father gave life to everything. Father laid out the heavens. That's what Nebuchadnezzar was guilty of, thinking like an animal. For fear is nothing but a giving up of the hope that comes from reason. And you've gave up that hope that comes from reason. You don't make sense. God never asked a blood offering of you. God asked you for thanks. And if that thanks turns into, I want to do something nice for my neighbor, then that's akin to an offering unto God, a thanksgiving offering unto God. Those are all saw as thanksgiving offerings unto the true God. God doesn't say, hey, go shed blood, go kill an animal for me. I own them all, she says. I don't need your bloodshed. I want you to walk in the truth. That is how you are preserved. You are not preserved by shedding blood. That's what kills you out of the land. And certainly an idol. And hope defeated by this inward weakness prefers ignorance of what causes the torment. But throughout the night, which was really powerless, and which came upon them from the recesses, get this, of a powerless Hades, they all slept the same sleep. You're still asleep in ignorance, is what God said. Hades has no power to claim you unless you give Hades that power with this wicked imaginations. Your own fear and your own cowardice. You are condemned by your own testimony. And you won't wake up from that sleep. So, but throughout the night, which was really powerless, and which came upon them from the recesses of a powerless Hades. Hades is a Greek term. And it means a burning hell. Sheol in the Old Testament was a Hebraic term, and it did not mean a burning Hades. There was an upper Sheol and a lower Sheol, right? Those in life, those in death, and I'm not so sure that don't mean earth. Us who's walking on the ground are alive. Those below it are dead. Now they'll spin that interpretation around again too. But earth is saw as the womb that gives life, or can bring death. And it's akin to a spirit that represents Earth's womb. It is. So, but it was the recesses of a powerless Hades, and they all slept the same sleep. You're all in a religious lie. The power of a religious lie is pretty potent. What brings us into darkness if it isn't idol worship? That the darkness in the land, what's the darkness in the land? It's the religious lies. So I'm making sure here. That's chapter 18, so I can't get ahead of myself. So we have the dreamers that awakes, or the dream that awakens from sleep. That's in Isaiah, where is it? That's verse 15 and 16. Yeah, verse 15 and 16. Now they were driven by monstrous specters, and now were paralyzed by their soul surrender. For sudden and unexpected fear overwhelmed them, and whoever was there fell down, and thus was kept shut up in a prison not made of iron. So you're not shut up in a prison made of iron. You shut up in this, in your mind that can't break free of the religious lie that you were taught, and you forgot over time what those men did behind a dark veil. And all these things is going to come upon you because you're bringing them upon yourself, is your idea. So we also get a dreamer in Isaiah 29, 7 and 8. Do I have that one up? I'm pretty sure I do. Might be at the end here. Sorry about that. I don't know that I pulled it up. Let's see. There it is. So what it says this, so this is Isaiah 29. So yeah, in the multitudes of all the nations that fight against Ariel, Israel, even all that fight against her and her munitions, her stronghold, and that distress her shall be as a dream of a night vision. She will finally awaken from the religious lies and lies of those that attack her, right? To bring her spirit out of the land is what this was all about, or at the very least, put her asleep. Actually, Mother says, I'll put you to sleep. And you won't have to be awake to all the atrocities that this lie is going to bring upon this entire world. And it did. So it shall even be as when an hungry man dreameth, and beholdeth, he eateth, but he awaketh, and his soul is empty. Or as when a thirsty man dreameth, and behold, he drinketh, but he awaketh, and behold, he is faint, and his soul has appetite. So shall the multitude of all the nations be that fight against Mount Zion, against her. Right? It's as a dream of the night. That's what it's compared to. And she will awaken from this religious lie, which, according to this, they're all asleep in it. But throughout the night, which was really powerless, powers of darkness are really powerless against you, and which came upon them from the recesses of a powerless Hades. Powerless Hades. There's no such thing as these demons that can come up. You know who the real demon is? That man over there who wants to put a bitter law system upon your neck. That's the real demon. And he's called the he-goat in the Bible. And he climbed to her throne of power, and he pushed her off. He murdered her, is the idea. The spirit was murdered in the land. They took control in the next generation of girls, young girls. When the wise women were murdered, that would have taught them not to bow to a king. And took control of this next generation of daughters and taught them a religious lie and law. And this was all part and parcel of it. It was like the king Nebuchadnezzar when he made this idol, and he said, wow, or it was Darius. Well, I believe it was Nebuchadnezzar that made this idol and said, if you don't bow, we're going to heat the furnace and you're going to burn. It's an idol threat. It truly is an idol threat. It's a powerless Hades, right? It only has the power that you want to give to it. And that's through your fearful mind, unwilling to reason, which it's that simple. The truth of God reasons. For fear is nothing but a giving up of the helps that come from reason, from wisdom. You don't want her help. You have become hopeless when all of your hope is found in the blood of an idol. An idol don't bleed, and blood can't save you. It stains you. You are considered stained in it, not washed. But throughout the night, which was really powerless, and which came upon them from the recesses of powerless Hades, they all slept the same sleep. And now we're driven by monstrous specters, and now we're paralyzed by their soul's surrender, for sudden and unexpected fear overwhelmed them, and whoever was there fell down, and thus was kept shut up in the prison, not made of iron, but of their own making, of their own mind. For whether they were farmers or shepherds or workers, we get all male here, who toiled in the wilderness, they were seized and endured the inescapable fate. For with one chain of darkness, they all were bound. That one chain of darkness that led to your total imprisonment. Lies of idols. Man-made idols of he, or he. However, they began to prophesy through Baal and the wicked imaginations of their mind, and they began to say, he said, when I sent you not, and you ran, yet I told you not to go, I sent you not, and you ran with your religious lies that you are now in bondage to. You are trapped in them. Let me see. Inescapable faith, for with one chain of darkness they are all bound. Whether there came a whistling wind or a melodious sound of birds and wide-spreading branches or the rhythm of violently rushing waters, it's their imaginations, the wicked imaginations killing them, or the harsh cracks of rocks hurled down, or the unseen running of leaping animals, or the sound of the most savage roaring beasts, or an echo thrown back from a hollow of the mountains. It paralyzed them with terror. Every which way terrified them. They were just terrified by their own imaginations of their own minds, by a powerless Hades. For the whole world was illumined with brilliant light and went about its work unhindered. So we get that in the day of the Lord, don't we? Okay, so we're not quite there yet. Yeah. In Isaiah 59, their web of violence became a web, a garment that can't hold together, the web of lies, web of violence. And so this web can't hold together a body, is what it's saying. So that is why you go down into the earth, and that is why you decay. Your body is not holding together because you have created a web of lies based on an idol, which God told you as a first commandment. You were to have no other God before you but the truth. God says, you saw no image of me, you make no image. God was telling you, don't make an image of God. But God did say, you follow my law. And it was a gently flowing law system that came off the tongue of Shiloah. She is a scepter between Judah's feet, and the way that God ruled. And you denied that. So where were we? For the whole world was illumined with brilliant light and went about its work unhindered. So I take it that those in religion and made up foolishness, you're the ones in darkness, but the light will continue to do her work. She will still continue to go about illuminating with a brilliant light. And we told that she is the covenant of light gave in Isaiah 49. She says, oh, the world may have forgotten about you, my dear daughter. Ephraim, the firstborn of my womb. It's a daughter, not a son. But I have not forgotten about you. I will call you out of the earth. We will establish your case. You will receive your dominion back, and there you will go forth, and you will question man, and you will rebuke him as to why he did the things he did. And we know why. It's called pride. For the whole world was illumined with brilliant light, and that light went about her work unhindered. While over those people alone heavy night was spread. You're in darkness. You're in utter darkness. Although God says in Isaiah 25 verses 7-8, I will remove that dark veil that is spread over the earth. I will remove it away from them so that they can see the light of truth. And we do get that in the last verse. I believe it's Isaiah 29. Those that erred in doctrine will learn truth. It says they will grumble, they'll groan about it, but they will learn the truth. So while over those people alone heavy night was spread, an image of the darkness that was destined to receive them, but still heavier than darkness were they to themselves. It's what you've conceived is your own darkness. You've created it yourself. You've created your own hell. You've locked yourself into a religious lie instead of choosing to walk the way of God and to be part, and I don't like this word, be part of the federation under God's holy law. You chose to go against that. God says, I will toss you like a ball in a far off land. We get those allegories actually in a couple of the movies. And Star Trek. What is it? I forget what it was called. The uninhabited land, or I forget what it was called. But the idea is that this ball was cast into a far, and the idea is we got out of the proper rotation. We are not part of God's heaven. This lot that was allotted to her when it fell through man's rejecting of the righteous Spirit's covenant, which come off her tongue as the law that was to govern the land. It was a gentle flowing law. It would have kept us in that federation of heaven. I think the idea of 7 has the idea that there may be 7 left still existing that has people on it. I might be wrong about that, but it seems to be one of our possible allegories. So, verse Wisdom, chapter 18, light shines on the Israelite. So we're going to bolt through the first 6 verses, I think. I think that's the chapter. But for your holy ones, there was very great light. Their enemies heard their voices, but did not see their forms, and counted them happy for not having suffered. And were thankful that your holy ones, though previously wronged, were doing them no injury, and they begged their pardon for having been at variance with them. Therefore, you provided a flaming pillar of fire. Now, these holy ones, they don't want to establish that they were female. The presence of God is so identified as she-goats. They're also identified as the lilies of the covenant. They were lilies because they were so pure in form. And that's a great light. And we get the idea that Moses had come down with some of this illuminated understanding from these wise holy ones, and he actually had to place a veil upon his face. I tend to see a female in that notion. The bride would wear a veil on her face. She's drawn out of the waters at the end. She's preserved for the very end, it says. But we get all, and they'll say Moses had horns in some renderings. And even in some of the old sculptures and some of the old sanctuaries in the old parts of the world, they'll have images of supposedly Moses with horns. And they'll say, well, why did he have horns? Why does he got pictured with horns? Horns was a symbol of illumination. He was illuminated with the truth, is what it's saying. Now, when you go in and you read the veil part, when you go in and you look that word veil up, it's going to say horns as well. Well, why horns? For anybody who can't draw, when you got light, what does it do? It shoots out horns, don't it, all around it. And so horns tend to be a symbol of illumination, and that's why horns is also female. Wisdom is illuminated. And so we get kind of all of this understanding how the holy ones were actually not really seen because they were so bright with light and illuminated that they couldn't understand them. Perhaps maybe another possible rendering, because we are looking at allegory. And we're thankful that your holy ones, though previously wronged, were doing them no injury. So let's go back up. But for your holy ones, there was very great light. You see, when you're looking into a great light, you can't see what's standing there, can you? Their enemies heard their voices, but did not see their forms, and counted them happy for not having suffered, because these holy ones' jobs was to preserve you. And when they failed to listen to them, the holy ones accordingly did not perform wickedness due to the injury caused upon them. So, and they were thankful that your holy ones, though previously wronged, see, were doing them no injury. And they begged their pardon for having been at variance with them. And they have been at variance with the righteous daughters that they come from a long eternal line, it says. A long eternal, what did it say? Let me go back. It's important enough to go back and look at it. Eternal providence. And that means that there was daughters, a daughter or daughters gave in covenant that came from an eternal providence. We're told in Job 31 that she came above. She was the portion of God that came from above, from an eternal providence. And it meant that she had the ability to follow her lineage back thousands, who knows, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of years back. It was an eternal providence. Now, if you could go that many generations back, you would say it was eternal providence, wouldn't you? You would. And we get that understanding also in this female descendant that you find in Micah chapter 5, verse 2. And it is a female descendant that comes out of the draft house, it says. Now, a draft house is a dung house. It's a toilet, right? And what do we get? Baal. What is he known as? He's known as Lord of Dung. That's the name of Baal. And Baal is another name for your husband who wanted to play God. So we get this eternal descendant, this eternal providence actually identified as a female descendant who will be your governor, found in Micah chapter 5, verse 2. It's interesting. It's called eternal providence. That's her descendancy. And they begged their pardon for having been at variance with him. Therefore, you provided a flaming pillar of fire as a guidance for your people's unknown journey. So that was provided by the presence of God. The presence of God was identified as a camp of Mahanaim. You find the same camp with the Shulamite. It's a double camp at that point. We know one camp was made up of 72,000, so this double camp is 144,000, and it is called the new branch that God will rule through, Zion. And it's female. So therefore you provided a flaming pillar of fire, okay? A guide for your people, unknown journey, and a harmless sun for the glorious wanderings. So this was not a burning light. It was a gently flowing water, we're told, just like it was a gentle sun. It was perfect. It was not hot. It was not cold. It allowed things to grow really in a superb, I guess, way. And we know that in the beginning, Israel flourished to the point that Balaam and Balak were standing at one point, and they were overlooking this massive camp of Israelites that were ruled by the wise women. The men were hearkening to their laws. They were upholding their covenant. That was what the man or the father's job was to do. It was to uphold the wife's covenant, or the spirit, as she was known, covenant in the land. They were to uphold that. They were not to beat her down. They were not to put laws upon her neck. They were not to treat her in bitterness, which is what we all get in connection to a whole series of words connected to Balaam. Balaam's father's name meant a burning hate. And then the Shulamite says, look not upon me, because the sun has looked upon me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyard. But my own vineyard have I not kept. So here we got, it was a harmless sun for the glorious wandering. For their enemies deserved to be deprived of light and imprisoned in darkness. Those who had kept your children imprisoned, through whom the imperishable light of the law was to be given to the world. So what's the light of the world? What's the light of the world? It isn't man and blood, a sun and blood. That's not the light of the world. The light of the world was the law given off the daughter of Zion's tongue, and she was called the firstborn of God. And she was so denied. So what do I have for that? Let's see, chapter 18, what brings us into darkness? What brings us into darkness? What did we see of the enemies? Her enemies here. Idol worship. That's what brings you into darkness. You're in the land of Egypt right now. You're in idol worship. And what brings you into light? Following the law. That's what this said. Through whom the imperishable light of the law was to be given to the world. She was sent in covenant and in oath, with an oath, that the first Adam agreed to uphold, and he perjured that oath. He perjured himself in the courts of heaven when he accused her. And she goes silent. She says, long time have I held my peace. Now will I go forth. I'll set the case in order, and I will rebuke you for your lies. And if this isn't a lie, then you simply are too cowardly to reason the truth out. So the death of the Egyptian firstborn. Let's see, where do we go from here? So what leads us into light? Through whom we know it's the light of the law. Verse 5. Okay, now we're going to begin. The death of the Egyptian firstborn, when they had resolved to kill the infants of your holy ones. And one child had been abandoned and rescued. They would tell you that's Moses. Moses' name means drawn from the water. We get actually in where is it? Second Ezra of the Apocrypha, Second Ezra chapter 13. I've done videos on this. It's she whom she has reserved for the end, who is drawn from the water. That's the people. She's drawn out of the people. She's the spirit that's called forth to give a defense of why the earth is in the bloody mess it's in. So once she sets her case in order and she rebukes fallen Adam, then she's got the right to judge. Judgment goes forth. So she who is drawn from the water, that is the firstborn daughter that's being drawn from the water, when they had resolved to kill the infant of your holy ones, and the one child had been abandoned and rescued, you in punishment took away a multitude of their children. So that was the firstborn sons. That's all to do with idol worship, putting your sons as the most precious thing. That's no slap to the daughter's head, right? Sons are only viewed as precious, according to Lamentations 4, when they are following the wise one's laws. Then they are considered precious as gold. Lamentations 4 tells you that. They began to offer up a blood-like libation. They became as nothing more than the value of clay pots. You're valueless to God. That's why you got cut away. We're cut away. We're hanging down in this first dimension without understanding. We're in darkness. We're not walking the laws that would put us in contact with the heavens, where we once abode, according to the scriptures. So, and you took away, punishment took away a multitude of their children, that was their sons, and you destroyed them altogether by a mighty flood. That was in the pursuit, right? The Red Sea parting. That night was made known beforehand to our ancestors, so that they might rejoice in sure knowledge of the oaths in which they trusted. They trusted in her law. That's the oath that they agreed to uphold. She who is drawn from the water, that is the firstborn of the daughter, verse 6, oaths that preserved them, and their way was the oath of the firstborn daughter. And that was the spirit of the original covenant found in Malachi 2. But the plague is stated in Psalm 106, break in upon them. And that plague was brought in by Balaam. And Baal means husband as Lord and God. That's what it means. They were afraid, like the cowards they were, of the women. They were afraid of them. And even yet today, you watch them attack women. They're terrified of us. Absolutely terrified. It's crazy. We're the weaker, the dumber sex, so we've been told our whole lives, our whole existence, and yet they're afraid of us. Oh my gosh. Like weakness. It speaks of weakness and fearfulness. They're afraid to reason. They're afraid of it. They're afraid what it's going to tell them, which is the truth of their lie. So, for by the same means, okay, for in secret the holy children of good people. So this, it's funny, it's a secret here. For in secret, the holy children of good people offered sacrifices and with one accord agreed to the divine law. So what was the sacrifices? They're hid, it's a secret. They were offering praises unto wisdom. That's who they were offering it to. And they were agreeing to the divine law. And these were considered good people. For in secret, the holy children of good people offered sacrifices. That's not blood. That's a thanksgiving offering. And with one accord, agreed to the divine law, so that the saints would share alike the same things, both blessings and dangers. And already they were singing the praises of the ancestors, right? Whom your fathers did not fear. You know, they're singing the praises that their ancestors sang, which was songs unto the Most High, which is our Creator and our Maker. And we find daughters in Jeremiah chapter 9 being told to come forth and to bring these chants and to chant in mourning for themselves, because they were destroying the daughters of Zion. That's what they were doing in Jeremiah 9. They were doing it in Micah chapter 2. They were tearing these wise women's houses down off the wall because kings like Solomon, kings like Hezekiah wanted to take possession of that wall. They wanted to dab up the gateways that belonged to these righteous daughters who were known as the Key of David. And they changed it over for the key of Solomon, a harlot spirit that would bow to a man as God. Now, I don't know what's so hard to understand about that reasoning, but it does so reason, and it states only the fearful is going to reject it because they're too afraid to even try to reason. So let's see. But the discordant cry of their enemies echoed back, and their piteous lament for their children was spread abroad. The slaves was punished with the same penalty as the master, and the commander suffered the same loss as the king. So all lost their firstborn sons. Now, why do you suppose she went after the firstborn sons? You know why? Because they were preaching religious lies, just like fell into Israel. Israel fell into the contamination. And we're told of that contamination in Isaiah 10, Psalm 106, where they changed their glory over to that which eateth grass. That's your contamination in the plague that break in upon them, which came by way of Balaam, Balak, and the idol, the gold calf idol. But they heard what would happen if they did the same thing. So they have these in their memories. The slave was punished the same as the king. They all lost their firstborn. And they all together, by the one form of death, had corpses too many to count. For the living were not sufficient even to bury them. Since in one instant their most valued children had been destroyed. Oh, we hear this, daughters, don't we? There's nothing more precious than a firstborn son. Even a secondborn is more precious than a firstborn daughter who you never hear of. There's no such thing as a firstborn daughter. And even if there is, she's never going to be as precious as a firstborn son because of their man-made religious lies and laws. God made us equal. That's why God said, you saw no image of me, you make no image, neither male nor female, but you do follow my law. And that comes off of my daughter's tongues, who's known as the presence of God on earth. So, let's see, the slave was punished. For the living were not sufficient. For though they had disbelieved everything because of their magic arts, yet when their firstborn were destroyed, they acknowledged your people to be God's child. That's the woman's seed. The woman's seed is her firstborn daughter that was denied from the very beginning as a foundation stone. For while gentle silence enveloped all things, a gentle silence, and night in its swift course was now half gone, your all-powerful word leaped from heaven, from the royal throne, into the midst of the land that was doomed as a stern warrior. That is the presence of God. This is the presence of God saw as the sword. The word then becomes a sword that will cut away all these firstborn sons. And so we see this actually as the presence of God, is what is really being referenced here. Your all-powerful word leaped from heaven, from the royal throne, into the midst of the land that was doomed a stern war. So they may have had one come down with the word, carrying the sharp sword of your authentic command, and stood and filled all things with death and touched heaven while standing on earth. That's the presence of God. And so when clearly the Egyptians did not want to let her people go, then she gave word, okay, they're not receiving your word. Then it comes to be a sword used to cut away the wicked. Then at once apparitions and dreadful dreams greatly troubled them, and unexpected fears assailed them. And at once apparitions and dreadful dreams greatly troubled them, and unexpected fears assailed them. And one here and another there, hurled down, half dead, made known why they were dying. For the dreams that disturbed them forewarned them of this, so that they might not perish without knowing why they suffered. So they gave the dreams beforehand to know why they were going to be cut away. And we've discussed why you don't make idols. You make idols, you reject the true living God's law, you refuse to walk in it when you make an idol, which is exactly what they claim. All you need is blood. It doesn't matter what you do. It's just the blood of your idol, of your man that'll wash you clean. Don't worry. Nothing else can save you. God says you rejected my divine law. And you made yourself idols, and I warned you that was your first commandment of the 10 that I gave you. So threat of annihilation in the desert. The experience of death touched also the righteous, and a plague came upon the multitude in the desert, but the wrath did not long continue. So here we see the flip of the sword, the word, back to the word. When you're hearkening to God's truth, she'll protect you, right? She's going to protect you. When you're not hearkening to a word, that word becomes a deadly sword unto you. That's your allegory. Your sword is your tongue, is your word. You'll get those allegories all through Psalms. We've studied it. We've looked at it. For a blameless man was quick. No, a blameless woman with no guile was quick to act as their champion, and she brought forward the shield of her ministry, which was prayer and propitiation by incense. So where do we get that understanding? Over here. So I did verse 20, the experience of death touched also the righteous. So division begins. So the angel of the Lord with her special office of the word, which when rejected then becomes a sword to the enemy. She was the sword of death to the Egyptians, and she was the firstborn, and to the firstborn. And then with the Israelites, she then defends. So she saw something in them, obviously. Prayer and propitiation by incense is the words of praise, and they are like sweet smelling incense unto God. When you are praising God's truth and God's way, we see her coming up out of the desert, out of the wilderness, like a sweet smelling savor unto her God. That's found in Song of Songs 3:6. Do I got that pulled up to read? Pretty sure I got it somewhere. Back. Go back. I'm going to skip some of these references. Of course, I don't have it up. Let's go to it right quick. Song of Songs, what was it? 3:6. Song of Songs 3:6. What does it say? This is the sweet smelling savor coming up unto our Creator's nose. Okay. So we go here. So it is Song of Songs 3:6, and it says this, if I can read it. 3:6, who is this that cometh out of the wilderness like pillars of smoke perfumed with myrrh, frankincense with all the powders of the merchants? It's her firstborn daughter. We know it's her because she's found leaning upon her beloved who comes to get her. Where's that? It's here somewhere. You can find it. She leans upon her beloved. Who is this that cometh out of the wilderness? It says it in two different passages, in two different ways. Yeah, right there. It is chapter 8, verse 5. Who is this that cometh up from the wilderness leaning upon her beloved? I raised thee up under the apple tree, and there thy mother brought thee forth. There she brought thee forth that bare thee. So that's the spirit that bore her. She's the apple. That's why we bring in the apple tree. She's the apple of her mother's eye. And she's the apple of his eye, her lover's eye. Is your understanding there? So she comes out like a sweet smelling incense when she begins to take in and understand who her creator, her maker, and her potter is. The one that she denied in the days of her youth by men like Mordecai taking over the next generation of little girls and teaching them a lie how to bow to a king. And mother is jealous over that. She's jealous over her daughters. I mean, any woman out there has daughters. I don't have daughters. But I know if I had one, I'd be fiercely protective of her. And I think it's no different with our Heavenly Mother. I mean, she's our eternal providence. She's the one that we spring from. And she's going to fight for us. She is. And she's going to be jealous on our behalf for what was done unto us wrongfully after we present our case. So where was I? 21? So for a blameless woman was quick to act as their champion, she brought forward the shield of her ministry, prayer and propitiation by incense. A sweet smelling savor is like propitiation unto God in prayer and understanding and reasoning and the truth. She withstood the anger and put an end to the disaster, showing that she was your servant. She conquered the wrath, not by strength of body, not by force of arm, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit do I do all these things. That's found in Zechariah 4, verse 6. So we know it's she, the spirit, the woman represents the spirit. We get that understanding. Malachi 2. If you're not too fearful to go in and actually experience that for yourself and say, hey, that reasons, right? It's really that simple. But by her word, she subdued the avenger. Appealing, so by her word subdued the avenger, appealing to the oaths and covenants given to our ancestors. So we see actually a future prophecy, an oath that was given to our ancestors, right? Remember, don't forget the past. They hid when they buried the truth over with. But it is hid in our spirit. We have to want that truth. We have to be willing to seek it in order for it to present itself to us. We have to order our case aright. For when the dead had already fallen on one another in heaps, she intervened and held back the wrath and cut off its way to the living. For on her long robe, the whole world was depicted. This is in the last video. We did a study on this. And the glories of the ancestors were engraved on the 4 rows of stones, and your majesty was on the diadem upon her head. It says the 144,000 bears a mark in their forehead. That's Emeth, mothers of truth, holy unto God. They're holy. They're finally the new branch that turns back. Oh, that a fire had come out of Zion. Where is my daughter to speak my truths for me? Where is she? And in the end, there's 144,000. Though it speaks, when that great earthquake happens, 7,000 who have not bowed their knee to Baal, to the idol of Baal, who were her original, eternal providence from the beginning. We can claim our ancestries back and back and back in eternity, is your idea. These 7,000 have not bowed their knee to the idol, and they are preserved to the very end with the truth. For when the dead had fallen on one another in heaps, she intervened, held back the wrath, and cut off its way to the living. For on her long robe the whole world was depicted, and the glories of the ancestors were engraved on the 4 rows of stones. And your majesty was on the diadem upon her head. To these, the destroyer, what's another name for the destroyer? Abaddon. Isn't that Abaddon? To these, the destroyer, Abaddon, or man, fallen Adam, yielded. These he feared, for merely to test their wrath was enough. He was just testing it. And that alone frightened him. It wasn't her all-out wrath. It was just a little bit of her wrath. And that alone frightens him. So Wisdom 19, we'll move along because I'm sure the video is getting very long. The Red Sea is the first part here. We're going to bolt through the first 5 verses because I think we can. But the ungodly were assailed to the end by pitiless anger, for God knew in advance even their future actions. How though they themselves had permitted your people to depart, and then hastily they sent them out, they would change their mind and pursue them. Now God knew that that's what was going to happen. She knew they were going to change their mind, turn around and come back after them and pursue them. For while they were still engaged in mourning, and were lamenting at the graves of their dead, that was their firstborns, they reached another foolish decision, and pursued as fugitives those whom they had begged and compelled to leave. So we get this understanding, perhaps there's an overlay of a future event here about to take place, that when God's chosen ones, when God's true Israelites, when God's true seed of providence, of eternal providence appears in the end, and when they are leaving the womb of Sheol, that perhaps they are pursued in some way. Anyway, for the fate they deserved drew them on to this end and made them forget what had happened, in order that they might fill up the punishment that their torments still lacked, and that your people might experience an incredible journey. We're going to go on an incredible journey when we leave the womb. But they themselves might meet a strange death, the womb of Sheol. When we leave this womb, we're going to go, the womb of Sheol. We turn away from these wicked thoughts of idol worship, and we turn back to our mother. We are birthed out. She's the only one who has power to do that, to deliver us. And we are birthed out, and according to that, we're going to go on an incredible journey. Even though we're pursued, we're going to go on an incredible journey. For the whole creation in its nature was fashioned anew, complying with your commands, so that your children might be kept unharmed. So where do we find a new creation, actually? We studied, again, this, and it was all wrapped up in one verse that we really studied and took a look at. That was in 2 Peter 3:10, and this is what it says. It says, "But the day of the Lord will come like a thief. The heavens will disappear with a roar, and the elements will be destroyed by fire, and the earth and everything done in it will be laid bare." So that verse actually took me to, where is it? Job 26:6. Sheol is naked before God, and Abaddon has no covering. That means a hiding place, a planet. The planet becomes exposed, and all that was corrupt on this planet becomes exposed. He has no covering. We realize that the covering of Judah was the daughter of Zion. That was his covering. And when he denied her, the harlot then becomes his so-called covering. And he says in Isaiah 28, the covenant that is to be disannulled, he says, "With the womb of Sheol are we at agreement." When the overflowing scourge comes in, they're not going to catch us. It can't, because the womb of Sheol is at agreement with us. The women, the worm, mother and daughter, who fed on father and son corruption, are at agreement. They're not going to catch us. We hid under a dark covering when we created this lie. There's no way they're going to catch us. But the snare they laid for us to fall into, they have fallen into it. So the elements here is your principle. And the principle, as we discovered, that is protecting is the harlot spirit. And here it will be destroyed by fire. Fire in the Old Testament is a feminine noun. It may not be here, but it should be. So the day of the Lord in which the heavens will roar. What's roar? A great rushing sound, a crash. Will pass away. Elements 4747, stoxia. We've looked at this word before. Come on. So one of a row, hence a letter. Heavenly bodies, a rudiment, an element, a rudimentary principle. So it has the idea of the harlot spirit that bows to man as if he's Lord and God. They're going to be burned away. Fire has the idea of to purify with the truth. So either by removal or by hearing the truth, you will be purified. So it will be dissolved with burning heat. Will be dissolved. It's not giving me what that is. Anyway, but that's where we find a connection to these passages in wisdom. So with the new creation fashioned anew, for the whole creation in its nature was fashioned anew, complying with your commands, with the divine law, so that your children might be kept unharmed, safe. The overflowing scourge is not going to come in and take you out if you're following the divine law and you've gotten rid of idol worship. The cloud was seen overshadowing the camp, and dry land emerging where water had stood before. You kind of get an allegory to the second heaven here. First heaven, earth may well be destroyed, and we get a new land, a new planet, perhaps appearing very close off our bows, in a very highly distressing time of change and renewal, and we know what happens when we go through that. So the cloud was seen overshadowing the camp, and dry land emerging where water had stood before, an unhindered way out of the Red Sea. So we know it is the presence of God identified as the daughters of wisdom that has to part the admixture of lies which sits on your table as a wine into the two covenants that are identified in Genesis 15:9. In a grassy plain out of the raging waves. where those protected by your hand pass through as one nation. That's the new nation of Israel, those who are hearkening to the divine law and giving praise and glory unto the Holy One. After grazing on marvelous wonders, for they ranged like horses and leapt like lambs, like she-goats, praising you, O Lord. So we get almost like a sense of coming and going there, I think. From the first to the second heaven, there's an actual physical contact, is kind of an overlay here. Praising you, O Lord, who delivered them, for they still recalled the events of their sojourn, of their journey, how instead of producing animals, the earth brought forth gnats, and instead of fish, the river spewed out vast numbers of frogs. Afterward, they saw also a new kind of birds, when desire led them to ask for luxurious food, for to give them relief, quails come up from the sea. So are they going to hit into the same mess before, or are they going to learn from the perils of what went on with Egypt? So the punishment of Egypt in this earth is currently called Egypt. It's called Babylon. Those are some of its titles. When she's walking the divine law, when he's walking the divine law, it then becomes known as Israel. The punishment did not come upon the sinners without prior signs in the violence of thunder. So what do we get? We get the seven thunders warning of the little book. Now, I take it that there may be 7 planets still existing in her lot of land that was allotted to her in the very beginning. 7 daughters may still exist on these planets. It may also have the 7 continents in view. There may be a daughter per continent, and they may be warning of the violence that is to come if you continue on this wicked path of idol worship. For they justly suffered because of their wicked acts, for they practiced a more bitter hatred of strangers. Others had refused to receive strangers when they came to them, but they made slaves of guests who were their benefactors. So I kind of get the understanding that the daughters that were given covenant, they made slaves of them. That's sort of an overlay here. For what portion is there from above? The inheritance of the Almighty from on high. So these women would have been considered guests, but they were strangers at the same time, and they made slaves out of them. And not only so, but while punishment of some sort will come upon the former for having received strangers with hostility, the latter, having first received them with festal celebrations, afterward afflicted with terrible sufferings those who had already shared the same rights. That's the women. Yeah. Then they were stricken also with loss of sight. They lost the ability to see the truth. Just as were those at the door of the righteous man, when surrounded by yawning darkness, all of them tried to find the way through their own door. So once you open your eyes, you see the doorway out, you know the truth. Once they leave, once these women of wisdom, then you become struck blind again, looking for the doorway out. I mean, you don't realize that you don't have it until you come away from weakness and choose to reason the truth out. And God's truth really is that simple. It's not that hard. So we got the last little bit to bolt through and we'll be done. A new harmony in nature, for the elements changed, places with one another. As on a harp, the notes vary the nature of the rhythm, while each note remains the same. So I suspect the song becomes sweeter when the elements are changed and all the right notes are put in their rightful place. And that was with the daughter Zion as your sovereign, giving you the law of heaven, with the righteous sons enforcing her law. That's how it goes. This may be clearly inferred from the sight of what took place. For land animals were transformed. This is where we get a crossover, possibly a first and second heaven, because we view the second heaven as a water full of life out there. So for land animals, we're transformed into water creatures. We're currently land animals. We do not come and go out into the waters of the second heaven. So we're currently land animals. So for land animals, we're transformed into water creatures, and creatures that swim moved over to the land. So it's almost like they're coming and going from the first and second heaven. It looks like a real physical planet's going to appear off the bow of Earth, so close that we can almost touch it, or we are going to touch it. We're actually going to live on it. Fire, even in water, retained its normal power, and water forgot its fire-quenching nature. There's great wonders to be seen. Flames, on the contrary, failed to consume the flesh of perishable creatures that walked among them, nor did they melt the crystalline, quick melting kind of heavenly food. So there's great wonders in that to be seen. So the conclusion, here's our final verse, and the conclusion of our final study, verse 22 of Wisdom chapter 18. For in everything, O Lord, you have exalted and glorified your daughters. It says people. I think it should be rendered your daughters. And you have not neglected to help them at all times and in all places. When we're right on the cusp of the end, she'll send help. I'm an example. So what's the word for help here? They'll tell you it's a masculine noun. It's not. Help, Strong's Hebrew is Strong's Hebrew 5828. It is 2 times applicable to the woman in her creation account as your great help. The other 19 times this word is used applicable to God. And they'll tell you it's masculine. Nope, this is the female. She's your great help. She's the spirit. Trying to teach you that the way that you are preserved is to walk the divine law of God and not to make an idol. That's what's condemning you right now. Plain and simple. That's it. That's what's condemning you. So there's the final video. I hope I got everything in there I'm supposed to get. I love all my subscribers. I thank you so much for staying with me, hanging in there from the beginning. There was like a very few in the beginning. And I believe they've been there from the beginning to this final end date of February 29th when I post this video. I thank you so much for being along on this journey with me. I really think there's going to be a few I'm going to be able to say, hi, I know you. I know you. In the next life. I really do. Thank you. Thank you so much for hitting the likes on my videos, for taking the time to watch, for going along in the studies, maybe not being in full agreement on everything I have to say either. But you've picked up the most important, that an idol is not God's way. Idol of a man is never God's way. You're without excuse. We know these things. As women, we have this truth written on our heart, and certainly daughters of eternal providence is what you are known as. I kind of like that term. Your ancestry is considered eternal, and though we don't realize it and maybe necessarily recognize it in full, we're certainly going to recognize it in full when we open our eyes in the next life. We've opened them in this one, and so that leads to a greater opening and understanding in the next, hopefully. So thanks for watching. I really did enjoy this climb. I'm going to continue that climb, maybe understand a few more things for myself before I leave this great old world. And hopefully you'll continue on in your studies. Maybe we'll compare notes in the next life. And I thank you for watching, and I pray you continue to be blessed with an abundance of truth. And I hope you all have a lovely day. And thanks.